All right, so you want to dig into some Enlightenment bullshit.
Sounds like a plan.
Let's raid the dusty attic of history.
Yeah.
We're talking powdered wigs, revolutions, and,
Whole lot of dudes trying to figure out the world, right?
yeah, without losing their heads. Well, some of them did, but hey,
That's a story for another time.
we're going deep on this one. Wikipedia, baby. Holy hell, there's some wild shit in there.
It's easy to think of the Enlightenment as like this stuffy, boring period, but
Yeah, I get that.
it was a total shitstorm of intellectual upheaval, man. Europe's rebellious teenage phase, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like Europe going through puberty.
Exactly. Questioning everything, ditching the church's dogma,
Fuck the church.
and getting obsessed with reason and science, like straight up challenging the powers that be and,
Took some balls, huh?
arguments.
So we've got Europe ditching the church's bullshit, discovering science.
It was a wild time, man.
Sounds like my kind of party.
Yeah.
But who are these brainiacs driving this whole Enlightenment thing?
All right, so rundown of the big players. We're talking heavy hitters here. Isaac Newton, the dude who figured out gravity.
Yeah, Newton, I've heard of him.
Enlightenment rock star, that guy. And then there's John Locke, you know.
Locke rings a bell.
The philosopher who gave us the whole idea of natural rights.
Natural rights, like,
Life, liberty, and property. Still kicking around today, even if some asshats seem to have forgotten about the liberty bit.
Yeah, tell me about it. Some people just want to watch the world burn. But wasn't it mostly a sausage fest back then? A bunch of dudes with powdered wigs and fancy ideas?
Sadly, yeah, diversity wasn't exactly their strong suit.
Figures.
But, you know, there were exceptions. Mary Wollstonecraft, for example.
Right, shout out to Mary.
Way ahead of her time, man. Arguing for women's rights and all that.
Right on, sister. So we've got these guys and a few badass women dropping some serious knowledge bombs. But where were they doing it? I'm picturing, like, smoky back rooms,
You're not far off.
secret societies, maybe a little blood sacrifice on the side.
Okay, maybe not blood sacrifice, but,
What, they were sacrificing virgins or something?
they knew how to party, let's put it that way.
Mhm.
Picture this. Coffee houses buzzing with debates.
Coffee houses? Seriously?
Salons hosted by powerful women, gossip, plotting, you name it. And of course, you can't forget about the Masonic lodges. All that secret society shit.
Wait, hold up. Coffee houses?
Yeah, man.
Seriously, those latte-sipping hipsters were shaping the course of history.
I swear. Coffee was a new thing in Europe back then. It was like rocket fuel for their brains. Those coffee houses. They were like the social media of the day.
Get the fuck out of here.
I'm serious. People from all walks of life, all gathered in one place, debating everything under the sun.
Like what? What kind of debates are we talking about here?
Politics, religion, philosophy,
Ah, the classics.
you name it. They were throwing intellectual punches over their espressos, man.
Damn, that's actually pretty badass. Who knew caffeine could fuel a revolution, right? So we've got coffee, salons, secret societies.
It was a hell of a time to be alive.
Sounds like a wild time. But how are they actually spreading these radical ideas, like beyond those caffeine-fueled debates?
They had a secret weapon. The printing press.
The good old printing press.
This was before the internet, remember? So books and pamphlets, they were like their blogs and tweets.
Makes sense.
And let me tell you, they weren't afraid to use them, spreading some seriously subversive ideas.
But weren't books back then, like, giant and boring as hell?
Some of them, sure, total doorstops. But they also had journals and pamphlets.
Oh, way.
Shorter, punchier pieces, like the op-eds of the day, but with way more wit and style.
So they were like the BuzzFeed of the 18th century.
Something like that.
I could dig it.
Yeah.
But they had this one megatome that's still famous today, right? The encyclopedia. What was that all about?
Diderot's baby, that was. And a beast of a book, let me tell you. Imagine trying to crowdsource all of human knowledge in the days before the internet.
Yeah, that's a lot of knowledge.
Art, science, philosophy, politics, everything.
Like Wikipedia on steroids?
Exactly. But printed on paper and bound in leather. Pissed off a lot of powerful people.
Why? What was it, full of dick jokes and naughty pictures?
Oh, that would have been interesting. Nah, it was dangerous because it challenged the authority of the church and monarchy, encouraged people to think for themselves, you know?
Not a good look for the powers that be.
Big no-no back then. It was like a giant middle finger to the establishment.
And they did not like that.
Not one bit.
Damn, those Enlightenment dudes were rebels with a cause. They were throwing intellectual shade like it was going out of style. So they're writing books, debating in coffee houses, spreading rumors and pamphlets.
They were busy guys.
Sounds like they were busy as hell. But did any of this actually change the world? Or was it all just talk?
Oh, it was way more than just talk.
Really?
The Enlightenment wasn't some ivory tower philosophy, man. These ideas had real-world consequences. They inspired revolutions in America and France, helped shape the modern world as we know it.
Hold on, are you saying those late-night philosophy arguments over a cup of joe
Yeah, those ones.
actually led to revolutions and political upheaval? That's mind-blowing.
It shows you the power of ideas, right? The Enlightenment proved that even in a world dominated by kings and priests,
Yeah, fuck those guys.
the human mind can be a force for change. These ideas were like seeds planted in fertile ground. They eventually grew into something that transformed the world.
Okay, so we've got this bunch of brainiacs shaking things up, spreading their ideas like wildfire, sparking revolutions. But let's get real for a second. Did they actually practice what they preached?
Ah, the million-dollar question.
Or were they just a bunch of hypocrites talking about liberty and equality while ignoring the whole slavery thing?
That's the thing, right? The Enlightenment gave us some pretty amazing things. Individual liberty, democracy, scientific progress. But it also had a dark side.
Uh-oh.
And that dark side was pretty damn ugly.
All right, spill the tea. Give us the dirt on how the Enlightenment went wrong.
Well, for one thing, they had this whole reason and progress thing going on, right? But somehow that logic flew out the window when it came to slavery and colonialism. It's like they conveniently forgot about those ideals when it benefited them.
Seriously, those Enlightenment dudes were all about enslaving people. I thought they were all about liberty and all that good
In
stuff.
theory, yeah. But in practice, a lot of these Enlightenment thinkers were totally cool with the idea of, like, European powers colonizing and exploiting the rest of the world. They saw it as bringing civilization to the savages,
What the fuck?
which is, you know, a pretty fucked up way of looking at it, don't you think?
Yeah, that's some serious bullshit. It's like they were all about freedom, but only for certain people.
Yeah.
Like if you weren't a white European dude,
You didn't really count.
you were screwed.
It's a major contradiction in Enlightenment thinking, and honestly, it's something we're still dealing with today.
Right, because that whole colonialism thing didn't exactly work out so well for the people on the receiving end,
Yeah.
did it?
That's putting it mildly. The legacy of colonialism is still felt around the world, man. It's a stark reminder that even the most enlightened ideas can be twisted to justify some truly terrible things.
So the Enlightenment was kind of like a beautiful, brilliant mess, full of progress and hypocrisy. How the hell do you reconcile those two sides of the coin?
That's the challenge, isn't it? They were brilliant minds, but they were also products of their time,
I guess so.
with all the biases and blind spots that came with that.
Makes sense.
It's like they were trying to build this perfect world based on reason, but they were using some pretty fucked up materials.
Yeah, true.
They couldn't quite escape the prejudices and limitations of their time.
A foundation of bullshit, basically.
Pretty much.
Like building a mansion on a foundation of bullshit.
Yeah.
But they did come up with some groundbreaking ideas, right? Like you mentioned this science of man thing. What the hell is that supposed to mean?
So imagine these guys, right? They've figured out how the planets move, the laws of physics, all that. And they're like,
We're so smart.
exactly. But then they look around and see humans being, well, humans. And they're like, what the fuck? Why are we such a goddamn mess?
So they were basically like the first psychologists trying to figure out the human psyche.
Pretty much. They wanted to apply that same reason and observation to human society. Figure out what makes us tick.
Did they come up with any good theories?
Yeah.
Besides the obvious stuff, I mean.
Oh yeah, some of their theories are still relevant today, like the social contract,
But what?
the idea that we give up some freedoms in exchange for the protection and order of society, right? Or natural rights. Every person has inherent rights that can't be taken away by any government. Radical stuff back then.
Yeah, I can see how that would piss off the powers that be.
Oh, it did. It helped pave the way for modern democracy, though.
So they were basically saying, fuck the king, we have rights, and we're going to create a society that works for the people.
You got it. Challenging those traditional power structures, coming up with new models of government, the separation of powers, for example.
But what now?
The idea that power should be divided between different branches of government to prevent tyranny, that's straight out of the Enlightenment playbook.
Damn, those Enlightenment dudes were spitting some serious truth. But it wasn't all about politics, was it?
No way, they were trying to understand the whole human experience, man. Economics, art, religion,
All that good stuff.
all through the lens of reason and observation.
So break it down for me. How did their thinking actually shape those different areas?
All right, let's start with economics. You familiar with Adam Smith?
Vaguely. Scottish dude, right?
That's him. Part of that whole Enlightenment scene. Came up with some revolutionary ideas about free markets and the division of labor.
Free markets. Sounds dangerous.
He's the guy behind the invisible hand. Individuals pursuing their own self-interest actually benefit society as a whole. The foundation of modern capitalism, for better or worse.
So he's like the capitalist guru.
Yeah, but controversial as hell. Some people think he's a genius, others blame him for all the inequality that comes with capitalism.
Figures. A mixed bag, like a lot of Enlightenment ideas. But what about art and culture? How did that whole reason thing play out there?
Well, imagine you're sick of all the fussy, ornate art that's been popular for centuries. You want something cleaner, simpler, more rational.
Sounds familiar.
That's the Enlightenment aesthetic. Inspired by the classical styles of ancient Greece and Rome.
So back to basics, but make it Roman.
Exactly. Clean lines, symmetrical designs, balance, harmony. Those grand buildings with columns and domes, all perfectly proportioned. That's the Enlightenment aesthetic.
It's all about balance, huh?
In art and in life. They believed beauty and truth were linked, and that art should reflect the order and harmony of the natural world.
I bet they loved listening to classical music while admiring their Roman temples.
Oh, they definitely had opinions about music, too.
No surprises there. What did those Enlightenment ears crave?
Music that was clear, balanced, emotionally restrained. They weren't into all that over-the-top drama and passion you find in earlier music.
So they were all about structure and logic, even in their melodies.
Think Bach, Mozart, Haydn. They were the rock stars of the Enlightenment music scene. Intricate, complex compositions, but elegant and refined, reflected the intellectual spirit of the time.
So we've got politics, economics, art, music, all shaped by this emphasis on reason and order. But what about religion? Didn't these guys want to ditch God and all that supernatural mumbo-jumbo?
It's a bit more complicated than that. They emphasized reason and science, sure, but they weren't necessarily anti-religion. Many of them were devout Christians.
Wait, seriously. How do you reconcile believing in God with all that logic and reason? Seems like a contradiction.
Not to them. They believed reason and faith could coexist. You could be a scientist and a believer. They weren't trying to kill God. They just wanted to understand him better. Maybe give religion a bit of a makeover.
So instead of burning people at the stake for heresy, they were trying to have a civilized conversation about God.
They believed in freedom of conscience, the right to choose your own beliefs without fear of persecution. Radical for its time and a major influence on modern secular societies.
So even though they were shaking things up with science and reason, they weren't trying to wipe out religion altogether.
They just wanted a more enlightened approach to faith, one compatible with logic and critical thinking.
Makes sense. Instead of blind faith, they wanted a faith based on reason and ethics. A pretty nuanced view for a bunch of dudes supposedly obsessed with logic.
They weren't just robots, man. They were complex people trying to figure out life, just like us.
All right, so we've got this whole Age of Reason thing, but we've also talked about the hypocrisy. Those Enlightenment dudes loved to preach about liberty and equality, but they conveniently ignored the whole slavery thing.
It's the elephant in the room, right? A major contradiction. They were trying to build a more just world, but they were still stuck in the limitations of their time.
Limitations like racism, sexism, all that shit.
Sadly, yeah. It's a complex legacy, and we need to be honest about it.
Right. No cherry-picking the good parts and ignoring the bad. But how did those contradictions actually play out in different parts of the world? The Enlightenment wasn't just a European thing, right?
Nope. It had a global impact. But it was received and interpreted differently in different places. For example, in the Americas, Enlightenment ideas about liberty and self-determination fueled revolutions against colonial powers. But those same ideas were also used to justify the continued enslavement of Africans.
So like a double-edged sword.
Exactly. Potential to liberate, but also to oppress.
Okay, so we need to be critical of the Enlightenment, but we also need to recognize its impact. It's a complex legacy with all its contradictions and complexities.
And that's what makes it so interesting to study. It challenges us to think critically about our own values and assumptions and to grapple with the complexities of history.
So we've talked about the good, the bad, and the ugly. But let's get specific for a second. How did those Enlightenment ideas actually spread? How'd they get their message out in a world without the internet?
They had to get creative. One powerful tool was the printing press. Pamphlets, books, even those scandalous underground newspapers spreading gossip and subversive ideas.
Wait, underground newspapers. Seriously, they had those back then.
Oh, yeah. They were called libels. Think of them like the TMZ of the 18th century.
Damn, so they were spreading gossip and dissent with ink and paper. That's ballsy.
It ruffled some feathers, but it helped create a more informed and engaged public. Knowledge was power, and the printing press was a democratizing force.
They were hacking the system with ink and paper.
Precisely. And they weren't just printing words, images, too. Political cartoons, satirical engravings, even scientific illustrations.
Illustrations, like those detailed drawings you see in old science books.
Yep. Beautiful works of art, but also a way to convey complex scientific ideas to a wider audience. And maps. Don't forget the maps.
Maps. How were maps revolutionary?
They were a way to explore the world beyond your immediate surroundings. Like Google Earth, but on paper. Sparked curiosity and a thirst for knowledge about the wider world, a key element of the Enlightenment spirit.
Expanding horizons, literally and figuratively. Maps, images, printing presses. What else?
The rise of scientific societies and academies played a big role.
Science societies. Felt like a bunch of nerds getting together to talk about atoms and shit.
They were more than just social clubs, though. Centers of research, debate, and knowledge dissemination. Think tanks of their time.
So they were like the Bill Nye the science guys of the 18th century, trying to make science cool for the masses.
Something like that. They published journals, hosted lectures, even staged demonstrations and experiments. They were a driving force behind scientific progress and helped popularize those core Enlightenment values: reason, observation, critical thinking.
So it was like a multimedia extravaganza.
Yeah.
A full-on assault on ignorance and superstition.
They knew that to change the world, they had to reach people through multiple channels. They were masters of communication and persuasion.
But they weren't exactly preaching to the choir, were they? I mean, I'm sure a lot of people weren't ready to embrace reason and ditch tradition.
You think? There was a lot of resistance, especially from those in power who benefited from the old ways. The Enlightenment was a gradual and often contentious process.
An uphill battle against the establishment.
They were persistent, though, and eventually won over enough people to make a difference. They understood change takes time. By planting those seeds of reason and liberty, they were setting the stage for a better future.
So the Enlightenment wasn't just about fancy ideas and philosophical debates. It was about real people trying to make a difference, even if they fell short of their ideals sometimes.
Trying to build a more just and equitable world. And their legacy is still with us today.
All right, so we spent this whole deep dive talking about the Enlightenment, these big brains trying to logic their way to a better world. But let's be real. Would these powdered wig-wearing dudes even recognize the world we live in today? I mean, they didn't even have Wi-Fi.
I know, right? It's mind-boggling to think about. Imagine dropping Voltaire into a modern-day Twitter war.
Oh, man, he'd have a field day.
He'd be like, what in the bloody hell is going on here?
He'd be all like, what the fuck is a meme? And why are people so pissed off about everything?
But on a serious note, I think they'd be both amazed and horrified by what we've created.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag for sure.
They'd be blown away by the advances in science and technology, the spread of democracy, the progress in human rights and social justice.
Yeah, imagine showing them a smartphone and explaining how it can access all of human knowledge. Their wigs would fly off.
Totally. But I also think they'd be horrified by the persistence of inequality, the rise of authoritarianism, the threat of climate change. You know, the whole reason and progress thing didn't exactly solve all our problems, did it?
Nope, we still seem to be pretty fucked up.
It's a work in progress, right?
Yeah.
But I think those Enlightenment thinkers would want us to keep striving for a better world, to use our reason and our ingenuity to solve the challenges we face. Never give up on those ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity.
So we're basically carrying the torch for those Enlightenment dudes.
Yeah.
Trying to live up to their ideals, even if we stumble along the way.
Yeah, I think so. Their ideas still inspire and challenge us today. They remind us that we have a responsibility to make the world a better place, to use our reason and our compassion to fight for what's right.
Okay, so final verdict on the Enlightenment. Success or failure?
It was neither a complete success nor a complete failure. It was a messy, complex, contradictory period that had both positive and negative consequences. It's not about judging them by our standards, but trying to understand their contributions within the context of their time.
So it's like a mixed bag, but a damn important one.
Exactly, a pivotal moment in human history. The Enlightenment set in motion ideas and forces that continue to shape the world we live in today.
Deep stuff, man. So there you had it, folks, our deep dive into the Enlightenment. We dug into the ideas, the people, the contradictions, those coffee-fueled debates, the scandalous underground newspapers, the groundbreaking scientific societies.
We explored how those wig-wearing revolutionaries challenged the powers that be, how they sparked revolutions, how they helped shape modern democracy, how their ideas about reason, liberty, and progress continue to resonate with us today.
We didn't shy away from the dark side either,
Yeah.
right? The slavery, the colonialism, the limits of their supposedly universal ideals.
It's a complex legacy, one that requires us to think critically about the past as we build a better future.
So what's the takeaway for all you brainy bastards out there listening?
The Enlightenment isn't just some dusty old history lesson. It's a living, breathing set of ideas. It's a reminder that we have the power to use our reason, our compassion, and our collective action to make the world a more just, equitable, and enlightened place.
Dan, that was some deep shit. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go pour myself a stiff drink and contemplate the mysteries of the universe.